Welcome to Canada's Social Changemakers. My name is Justin Douglas, and today I'm here with Jill Van Gien, CEO of FATSO Peanut Butter, social activist, and Canadian game changer. Thanks for being here, Jill.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So, to get things started, let's talk about FATSO Peanut Butter off the bat.
Yes.
As a social change maker, a company isn't necessarily what I would be highlighting, but the work that you do is actually really amazing, and I'd like to start talking about that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, so I started FATSO in November of 2016, so we're just coming up on my 4th year in business. I just started it out of the back of a local health food restaurant. I actually bought FATSO. I was watching this really amazing product on shelves here in Victoria just be absolutely run into the ground, and I tried to, I'd offered to do social media for them. I offered to do a small buy-in, and I got turned down across the board. And then finally one day I heard that their inventory had been seized because they were making it out of their basement. So I thought this is a really good opportunity. So I bought the name and the recipe and their assets, which was a couple KitchenAid mixers and some other material for about the price of a used car, and just dug in really deep. And we're now a national peanut butter company. We've expanded into the United States with Whole Foods, and we're available right across Canada and the US through Amazon. So it's been a really amazing 4 years. I certainly never thought, I don't know what I thought when I started my company, but I really did not think that this was going to be, the career path. It's certainly not what I saw for myself, but here we are. So.
And you've done amazing things with it in 4 years. You've really taken a company from zero and made it into something really special. But what is the product itself? Because it's not just a regular...
Oh, yes. Please let me explain. Okay, so FATSO is an all-natural peanut butter, and I've enriched it with plant-based super fat. So it's got coconut oil, avocado oil, MCT oil, chia seeds, flax, and a prebiotic fiber. And we have 3 delicious flavors. So we've got our classic, which is a bit coconutty. We've got our crunchy salted caramel, and then our cocoa flavor.
And it's all non-GMO, no GMO, and naturally sourced wherever possible, and a pretty amazing product, which by itself is really amazing. But what you've then done with the product itself and how you've turned it into a business model, can you talk about that aspect a little bit and how it's sort of not a traditional business model?
Yeah, so I guess in order to sort of explain why I've done what I've done with my company, and I guess I should mention that, FATSO is a very traditional capitalist focused company, just because that is the structure that we're given. On the other hand, we get extremely active within social justice movements. The reason why I did this, and it's to me it's really interesting because I went through a really intense period of depression after I graduated from my master's degree when I was 35. And I had gone back to school because I went to school for political science when I was in Montreal when I was quite a bit younger. I went through a very long period of addiction. I went into recovery in August of 2010. I actually just celebrated 10 years.
Congratulations. We're going to dive into that a lot more a little bit later.
So I went on this sort of mission to rebuild my life and fulfill these promises. I'd always been really interested in international affairs, in international development, social justice issues in general. So I went back to school for that. I graduated top of my class and published a research paper. I had started to work with the London School of Economics. I was offered a position to go do a PhD out there. Everything seemed good, but I became very disillusioned with not only the career trajectories that were offered either in academia or in international development. I all of a sudden felt like the curtain had been pulled back, kind of, on all the stuff that I wanted to do. It was like run off to these places that needed help. And when I was doing my research out there, I realized, I was writing on the intersect of conflict in an emerging oil industry. And I just went through so much work. There were so many thousands of dollars that were spent. There's so much time and attention paid to me. And I just thought, who is this research really helping? So as I was looking for a job after I graduated from my master's, coupled with this disillusionment, I fell into a really deep depression. And I've spoken a lot about how unemployment can create a really, really specific type of depression, because it's people want to believe in you, but they're also like, well, why can't you get a job? So you really feel that internally. So I really battled against this. And so when I found FATSO, it was one of these weird opportunities that if I had not been, close to, I really felt like I was like having some like difficulties with mental illness. Like I was so depressed and I was so distraught, but I was also at this like rock bottom. And because I'm in recovery from addiction, I am intimately familiar with what rock bottoms feel like and also what can happen at a rock bottom. So this opportunity came along and it felt like this, I felt almost like crazy going into it in this really real sense, because like who starts a peanut butter company? Like, especially after you've spent, your life, all this time rebuilding your life, and, you think that you're going on this trajectory and you fulfill these promises that society makes to you, which is like work hard and advanced education and graduate top of your class and write your research papers, and you still come up empty-handed. So, when I took FATSO on, I just thought, well, if I ever do well at this, I'm going to circle back to the stuff that I actually wanted to do. And FATSO, that was a long way to say that that's what I use FATSO for. I love my business. I love the community and the customers that are really, really supportive of the business. The industry itself is a really fun industry to work in. I get to work in all sorts of different disciplines. As a CEO, you're kind of a jack of all trades. So I've learned a ton of new skills. But aside from that, like my drive has always been, as soon as you're profitable, we shift into doing the work that you've always wanted to do. And in many ways, I have found that utilizing my business as a form of good has been more effective than I would have been writing research papers in some dreary office in London. And B has been like a real way to circumvent some of the deeply disturbing parts of capitalism, much of what we're seeing right now. So, I'm constantly at odds with this business model because people say, and I'll rail against capitalism, late stage capitalism, big fan of socialism, or at least social policies. And people will say, well, don't you run a business that's within the capitalist model? And I say, well, yes.
But you have no choice.
There is no choice, right? And the thing is, I think that people forget that we have an opportunity to be ethical in the way that we handle our business, the way that we handle our employees, the way that we handle our business relations. We just recently finished our B Corp assessment, which really pushes company and codifies companies in their, what do you call them? The articles of incorporation. So it really holds you to account. So around like human rights and environmental stuff, social justice issues. So we really push for that. And in the way that you give back to the community that essentially built you. Mm-hmm. And the community that built me, we're a premium peanut butter. That community is, relatively well off, relatively privileged. But underneath them, the community that, a lot of people are supported by, the people that are really at the bottom of our community are the people that need, support from what we do. So we give back to the most vulnerable in our community. We give back to the people who, may have been missed because they weren't born with privilege, because they were born a different color or a different sexual or gender orientation, that maybe they're immigrants, right? So there's all these different things that I think that I can use FATSO for, where we can kind of pull the e-brake on this real drive for capital, drive for profit, and look around and see how we can be a little bit more ethical in our business relations. And honestly, like, I can't think of a better word for it, but because it's an oxymoron, but ethical capitalism. I just don't see why it's like such a problem. Like, there's no reason I should ever be running like I should never have like a multi-million-dollar profit. I may at one point, but like I feel like we can divert some of that stuff to communities that need it, because these communities are just as important and have as much support for the wider community as we all do. So,
and you put your money where your mouth is, and I'm thinking specifically of sex workers, mm-hmm. and the peer support program. Peers maybe just talk a little bit about what the organization is and what happened publicly when you supported them.
Yeah, so Peers is a local organization here in Victoria, and they're essentially a resource organization for sex workers. I think people get there's two really big misconceptions around sex work. The first one is that it's connected to human trafficking. It is not. Sex work can be about a number of things, and it can include recovery from sex trafficking. Is certainly not promoted within that. So I just want to really make that distinction very clear, because there are women who choose to be in sex work and who deserve to be free from violence and free from poverty and free from stigma, because sex work is work. And then the second thing is just that we really want to remove that stigma from sex work, where people really like to shy away from anything to do with sex, just because we've been told that it's a shameful thing. And with this, it's not about saving sex workers, right? Many sex workers don't want to be saved. So just to clarify, one of the reasons why I really enjoy working with this particular organization and with this particular community is that it has an intersect of so many of the things that I would like to support in my life. It brings in a lot of people of color. It brings in a lot of LGBTQ plus people.
Especially trans people of color.
Yes, yeah, especially trans people of color. We have very large Indigenous communities here, and just through our sheer Canadian history, they end up sometimes in these lines of work. And I really appreciate an organization that can be there to support them if they want to continue to do it, or find ways to help them recover from trauma if they need to leave, or re-enter a different position if they need to. So it all started because it was an International Women's Day, and I wanted to pick an organization that didn't have a ton of money. I wanted to pick an organization that just didn't have the resources that other places had, that people were a little bit scared to donate to. So I picked Peers, and we raised over $2,000. Well, actually, sorry, we donated over $2,000. I just said, for every comment, I'm going to donate $2 to Peers, and we got a lot of comments. So it started there. And when I handed that check over, the executive director said something to me that really stuck by me. And it was that they never get donations of this size from companies like ours. It just doesn't happen. It was the single largest corporate donation that they had got all year, which floored me. It just wasn't that much money. And so I asked her, why that is. She said it's not like Junior Diabetes or Heart and Stroke Foundation, which are, really palatable. This is not something that the big banks want to donate to. It's not something that law firms want to donate to, or, larger community organizations. This is something that people shy away from, and that's why they don't get a lot of money. And she said, more than the money, it's the fact that you would take your company name and lend it to us, and that credibility.
And that's a good segue, because what was the response? I saw that Facebook and some of the social media companies had pulled back on your donation requests. Is that right? Can you talk about that piece? That Facebook, because it was mentioning sex workers?
Oh, yes, yeah. So, I mean, it's really hard to talk about sex work in general on Facebook, because their algorithm will see it as something that violates their community standards. So getting around that, because it looked like we were fundraising for sex workers, which we were, but in Facebook's mind, they think, well, you're giving money to prostitutes, which is illegal, right? So, so really working around that. We had to be very specific and well crafted with our language in order to circumvent those community guidelines. But we haven't had a ton of problems with that before or after that. Sorry, and I've been really surprised by the outpouring of support from the community.
Good.
In general, I think there's a few people, I would say, that may have been taken aback by our, support for this industry, which is fine. The wonderful thing about FATSO is that we've been pushing social justice issues for so long. So if you kind of started on the more moderate end of the spectrum and you're like, cool, FATSO's doing some interesting things, and then all of a sudden we were like, we're supporting sex work, and that, gave you some feelings, most of those people have the ability to self-reflect, and they may not agree with it right off the bat, but I think a lot of people see what we're doing, know that we research our organizations well, we get behind causes that we know are deeply important, and hopefully not problematic. So people tend to trust our name brand, and therefore we can shift that trust over to highly stigmatized causes such as sex work. So we've really committed ourselves to working with peers. We did an apparel campaign last year. We're about to relaunch it, where we actually had sex workers modeling our apparel wow. for a peanut butter company. It's just they're crew necks and like hoodies and t-shirts, and we gave them an opportunity to say the one thing they needed to say about sex work. And we used them as our models. We put their names and faces out there, of course, with their consent, and they were paid for their modeling as well. And 100% of the profits go to peers. So amazing. I'm not an apparel company, so I don't need to make money off apparel. We just want to, put people in a FATSO t-shirt here and there. So it's been a really fun and directed way for us to stay engaged with peers on a regular basis.
But it's not the only organization that you do a lot of social justice work. Maybe you can mention a couple of the other ones, and also the amount of work that you've done when the pandemic hit, and food security and maintaining food security on the island. Yeah,
I mean, we've worked with most of the outreach programs here in Victoria, some in Vancouver as well. We've given back to community. We did fundraising for them one year, and they're a trans and two-spirited resource center generally for youth in Vancouver. So we did some fundraising there. For Victoria Pride, of course, and for a couple of the women's shelters here. But yeah, in general, like we like to spread the love around where it's needed. We also, I don't know who we is, I spoke publicly about the railway blockings, or the blockades that were about to cut off Western Canada from some of the commerce coming from out east. We produce out east now, so we had a peanut butter shipment scheduled. We used rail for that, and there was a lot of outcry about Indigenous activists blocking the railway. For my part, I really support that stuff. Like, of course I never want to see violence or discord in my community, but I understand that it's a necessary tool to get people to truly listen sometimes. And, there's some other reasons why people do go beyond peaceful protest. I think both have their place. But I was getting angry because there was a lot of business communities and organizations, a lot of big CEOs that were getting their word about how this is going to hurt the economy and how are we going to get our products out here. And just this real, this is one of the problems with capitalism, is that you're always thinking bottom line, you're always thinking profits, and it makes you very narrow-minded. And so I decided to write an op-ed for CBC about how I supported the rail blockades, despite the fact that, had they gone on any longer, there would have been a severe FATSO shortage out here. We actually got lucky. I mean, it was lucky for us, but, those blockades were eventually taken down. But we definitely put our company name on the line when we did that. And I remember, because actually my sister and I were on the phone, she's in PR, and I was over doing a trade show in Vancouver, and I was in this hotel room, and we were just managing the mail that was coming in. And the hate mail, my favorite one was this guy that was just so angry, was never going to buy FATSO, had a few choice words for me. And I crafted this really, with the help of my sister, this really thoughtful response. So we thought, people want us to push back on this. They want us to be like, well, screw you too. But we thought, no, let's explain our position really carefully. Let's let them have their own opinion. Let's let them diffuse it and see if, we can have a good conversation. So we reiterated the position that we had in the article. We thanked him for his opinion and talked about free speech in Canada and how they're entitled to that. And I mean, honestly, to this day, it is well, my sister's single best piece of PR. She loves telling the story. But also I feel like one of our greatest achievements in doing this was this person not only was brought around on some of the points, not all the points, he also sent a picture of a freshly bought jar of FATSO. So we turned him around not only politically, but also on boycotting our product. we get threatened with boycott like really regularly. It's usually one person, so it's not that big of a deal, but we do get pushback from that. But yeah,
that is an interesting dynamic of having a product and having to rely on, as you said, privileged people buying that product, who are then potentially more apt to boycott a product if they don't like the social justice causes that you choose.
That's right.
And you have wholeheartedly, adamantly said, I don't care, I'm still supporting these causes.
Yeah. I mean, it's gotten very tricky these days. I am like completely a defund the police person. I mean, I don't mean defund it tomorrow. I mean, it's like saying all men are trash. I said that too. I don't mean all men, but I do mean like the general system in place is not good. So that has been one that has been very, very tricky to navigate. We did lose quite a bit of followers. I mean, like maybe a couple hundred. But there was something gratifying about losing those people because like now they know. And like I don't have to feel fear because we've still got 22,000 people who are on our side. And
22,001.
Yeah, thank you. So that was a bit of a nerve-wracking time because I was like, well, Jill, you're really going to have to choose. Like, what comes first here? Are you going to use your platform to put your message out, or are you worried you're going to hurt your business? Because you cannot have it both ways.
Right.
And so I thought, well, you know, this is the moral fork in the road. Like, you want to be a part of like what you call, which is still, it's such a stupid name, but ethical capitalism, or you want to take this ethical route towards business. These are the choices that you have to make. So far, they've been relatively easy. That one was, I knew could be bad. And I got some threats about, you know, the Abbotsford Police Union or something was aware of FATSO's stance on policing. And I thought, okay. Yeah. Well, I live in Victoria, so I don't know. Unless you say Saanich PD, I'm not too worried about it. But
no, but that's also a reflection of what's going on in greater society, and that police have a responsibility to all citizens and not to their own unions. And
yes. Yeah.
I mean, that's a greater conversation. But also, just before you move off of the social justice stuff that you do, I have to say during the pandemic, what you did to make sure that communities in Victoria and the greater area who might be food insecure, you donated a lot of your product to make sure that they got fed.
Yeah.
So maybe can you just talk about that quickly?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in many ways, this was my moment. I'm sure everybody will remember those first maybe like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, where we had just entered this lockdown. We were told to get 2 weeks of grocery. There was this like surrealness about it. And because I have a background in a discipline that includes food security, I could see early on where those gaps were going to be. And the gaps weren't necessarily in food. I mean, they were for the first little bit because people panic bought, and that meant that lower cost foods, your rice, beans, pasta, all that stuff that people who are in lower income brackets normally would access on a regular basis, they no longer had access to that because people were stockpiling it. So I saw that, and then I immediately realized that there was going to be a human resources issue. Because as soon as people kind of snapped to and said, oh, I've overbought, I'm going to donate, there was nobody to donate to in terms of like people to receive stuff. Because a lot of people were like, we're going to shut the business down for 2 weeks before, or the organization down for 2 weeks before we bring back staff in, which made sense. So there was this gap not only in like food items, but right after that got resolved, there was nobody there for service delivery to people who needed to access that food. So with FATSO, obviously I just started to bleed peanut butter. So we've donated over $54,000 worth of product, mostly here in Victoria, to almost all of the outreach organizations. And then in Vancouver as well, the Greater Vancouver Food Bank. We donated some to Seattle as well when they were being really hard hit. We have business down in Seattle. We had some closely a product that was down there, and we thought, you know what, let's get a pallet down to their food bank. So we did that. But in between that, there was a lot of organizational issues that needed to be done while a lot of the organizational workers were out. So I arranged to pick up food from residential areas. I came here to pick some up from you guys. We had people from all over the city saying, well, can I just give you money? So then all of a sudden we were receiving e-transfers and PayPal and that type of stuff. So we were raising money on one hand, picking up residential food items with people that had overbought or could give up some of what they had. So we rounded that up. We were able to distribute that throughout the community to places that were still receiving food. And then with the donated money, I was able to use that money to order through one of my distributors. So we get really good prices on that, obviously, and we sell them peanut butter all the time. So I was able to buy over $2,000 worth of food, like a huge pallet of non-perishable items, like everything from like diapers and period products to like just everything. I just thought, if I had nothing, what would I need right now? And we gave that to St. Vincent de Paul, which was a food bank that was really underserved. And then we started the safety sandwich program, where we were making about 300 peanut butter or FATSO and jam sandwiches. We partnered with a local bakery, Portofino Bakery, and Salt Spring Island Kitchen, who makes jams. And it was myself and my husband, and then myself, my husband, and my sister, and then myself, my husband, and my parents. And we just kind of rotated through this for a few weeks, delivering sandwiches. So there was ready-made food on the go, because sometimes people just don't have a place to cook, or there's cans and they don't have a can opener. So something that's easy to give out right to the streets was something that was valuable. So we did that for 5 weeks. Trying to think, we were very busy during that time.
You did so much, and I have to say how amazing it was. And to see a private business, a CEO of a private business in this sort of capitalistic model that you've talked about already, that we all have to deal with all the time, to take the privilege that you have and to give back to the community in such a profound way is beyond admirable and beyond appreciated. And it's something that I noticed being a community member, and that I just really feel needs to be validated and acknowledged.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a part of me too that I have to say, and maybe there is no such thing as altruism, but I had never felt more fulfilled in my life. My business was doing great. I had finally had this wonderful new baby in my life, and I was doing the work that I had set out to do. And it's a weird way that, I don't know, your destiny works, or the way fate sort of befalls you, is that's all I wanted to do. And the thing that my skill in life is filling in gaps. I realized, like, that is my skill. It's why I excel at being a CEO, because I can fill in all the gaps. Bring in the experts and you fill in all the gaps. And then it's why I was able to shift so quickly into being an ad hoc nonprofit, was that A, I was trained for this, but B, I could see the gaps forming before my eyes. And I don't know, I just thought, well, I have a truck, I've got 2 hands. And, it was a very scary time. And I remember my husband wasn't too thrilled with me, just because we did have a 6-month old at home. And I was like, I just need to do this. Like, I have to do this. Like, I have the resources, the capacity, and the will. And this is the thing that, like, I was put on this earth to do. So give me 3 weeks, right? Give me a few weeks to do this. And I felt very fulfilled during that time. And, it's really made me sort of double down on this idea of becoming this socially driven company. And we don't, like, I pay my employees really well. I pay myself really well. Like, I'm not going to lie about that. Like, I've worked very hard for this, but anything above and beyond that, I mean, the business diverts funds and resources to social justice causes. And in my personal life, I divert my personal resources and my time to those causes as well. So I just feel like super fortunate.
Some things that you've talked about very openly before, which is addiction and recovery, and your experience with it, and sort of hitting that rock bottom and seeing what other people go through, and having both the privilege and the plight, sort of. Yeah,
I mean, I don't really know where I got the social justice, the drive for social justice, but I do know that I think in addiction, privilege becomes very neutralized during addiction. I mean, when you start to pursue recovery, it's a bit different, but addiction is such an equalizer. It doesn't really matter what your background is. We generally all end up in the same family of feelings. The vast majority are suicidal, extremely self-destructive, filled with self-hatred and self-loathing. So I spent 15 years in addiction, and I guess I just saw enough and went to places that kind of opened my eyes to the fact that anybody can be drawn into these unfortunate circumstances. And I don't know, like, for me, like, the rock bottom, I mean, it took me twice to really get up and out of it, but I don't really know. I wish I knew what got me out of addiction, because then I would have the cure. For me, it was just a moment where I had crashed a vehicle in Oak Bay at 10 o'clock in the mornings right by my grandmother's house. And I was arrested, put in the back of, like, I was on the ground with a cop holding me down. And I just remember having this thought, like, I'm 30, this cannot be my life. Like, it just felt like this feels wrong. And it was the first time in my life that I felt that getting clean was a better option than going out. Like, going out actually scared me. So it was like this small little shift. It was super small. I used after I got out of jail that day. I don't mean to imply that I was in there for any longer, but then I ended up back in treatment and stayed clean from there. But I mean, I think a lot of this had to do with, like, my drive to do what I do today is I really wanted to make good on some promises that I had made to myself right before my addiction got really bad. And I had been interested in a lot of different things. And when I went to university out at Concordia, you know, I was driven towards this path initially and had become derailed. And you know, I think that there has been, I think in some ways there's this sort of a psychological aspect to it where I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to fill this promise, because what was the promise? But what I do know is that I have found fulfillment in pursuing social justice. Recovery from drugs and alcohol is an area that I can speak to, and it always helps people. There's never been a time where it has been detrimental. I think people get a bit scared of it. It's like, you know, it has the same sort of feeling as sex work. It's a bit taboo. People don't like to talk about it.
Sorry, just to interrupt, but to say that we're in British Columbia where we are in an opioids crisis and that we need to talk about it, because if not, more people are going to die. And
it's so interesting. Like the fact that we had 175 people die this month, and how many died of COVID?
Right.
And we're just like panicked, and like we should be panicked about COVID, but this is also a public health crisis. And the thing that bothers me the most about it is I grew up in Victoria, BC, in the uplands. Like, my parents were well off. I had everything that I needed to do to go on to a highly privileged life. I had some trauma in my past that knocked me off course, and it really didn't do wonders for the family dynamic. But, you know, it just can happen to anybody. Like, I don't even know if, you know, it was trauma or it was just something that I was born to. But, you know, I ended up in addiction, and I ended up in some very scary and denigrating situations over that 15 years. And that door will open to anybody. It doesn't matter how much is in your wallet, right? It'll take anybody down. Getting clean was again, I come from privilege, right? So I had an opportunity to go to some of the best treatment centers in BC. I went to the same one, I should say, twice. And even though, you know, I lived in a government-funded recovery house at the age of 30 for 3 months and was hitting, like, you know, daytime meetings every day. I did that for almost 2 years straight, and just went really hard on recovery. But I always had a safety net. And, you know, I think one of the points that I want to make with you know, this decade of sobriety now and looking back on it, and, you know, I have a lot of pride about my addiction, or about my recovery from addiction. But I also want to acknowledge the fact that, like you mentioned, like, we have a public health crisis here. It's odd because people seem to think that these 175 people, like, they all live in the downtown east side on Hastings Street. They all come from bad backgrounds. They were all criminals. And that 170, like, I think if you scoped out and saw who they were, they're your neighbor, they're, you know, your nephew or your niece, They're the person you went to high school with, who you always thought was going to be a huge success. There's the sports writer that it was just found, CBC sports writer, his cause of death was cocaine and fentanyl. Like, it is everywhere. And the fact that people can't wrap their heads around that, like, I'll be honest, like, the people that, like, by the end of my addiction, you're savvy, right? And a lot of people can avoid that stuff. I mean, a lot of people are dying in the streets, but I just wish people would step back and say, it is not just, sorry, you know what I should say is, it's not only people of privilege that are dying, or people of lower means that are dying. Fuck all that. I don't know if I can swear. If you can edit it out. Okay. No. I've been trying not to swear. So
do it.
But fuck all that, because you know what? It doesn't matter where you came from. Addiction is an equalizer. And the access that I had to recovery, like, I don't know, like the way that I was raised and like what I needed out of America, like I needed a really good treatment center to land in. Like I needed some comfort. Like that's how I was raised. And that was one of the things that helped me recover and helped me, you know, it was a softer landing. I don't know what would have happened had I not had that, but I'm glad I don't have to find out. But I know that there's so many people out there that they need different things. We have to have a holistic and varied approach to addiction and recovery that includes harm reduction as well. Like, people have this real fear about harm reduction. No, we should be doing that. Safe needle supply, safe drug supply, legalize it. We don't just want to decriminalize it. We should legalize it. There should be, you know, regulations around this. You know, and I like to speak publicly about it because it's my story. I would not have FATSO today if I had not gone on the path of addiction to recovery. I would not have FATSO if I had not navigated a second depression with being unemployed. There are so many things that I've touched throughout my life that have driven me towards... FATSO is my vehicle, right? My destination is all the other stuff that I've been doing. Like, it's no wonder I felt so fulfilled during, you know, the time we were doing work for the community during COVID. Like, that was the highlight of my career, of my 4-year career. And I just thought, like, this is rad. Like, I finally have the resources and the means to do this thing I've always wanted to do. And it was a short period of time, but it allowed me to step back and say, okay, like, how do I make this a more permanent structure within our business? And that's when we decided to pursue B Corp and put in some other programming and stuff like that. So.
That's amazing. Do you have any concerns for the future at this point with the ongoing COVID crisis, with your company, with food security in general, access to the peanuts and the products that you need for
yeah, I mean, I try not to think about it too much. We already had like it was a very wet season in the south, in the states where we get our peanuts, so we already went through a big price bump with peanuts in general. It's a commodity food, so that was kind of probably a harbinger of things to come, I would say. Yeah, I'm always worried about that. I mean, we're such a diversified little bit with our product, but I think we should all be worried. I feel like FATSO may be temporary. Like, I never want to just be like, well, I fucking did it, right? Because it never feels like that permanent. I also feel like I'm about to wake up from a really great dream, because this past 4 years, you know, everything that I strive for, I mean, we've been married for 7 years this year, but, you know, trying for a baby for 3 years and going through that, all while starting this business. And just this past year, it was like I got to enjoy it for like, I don't know, like 8 months, where it was like I was pregnant, I had this wonderful marriage, I still have a wonderful marriage, and this business was thriving, and then like COVID hit, and it was just like, okay, well, it puts things in perspective. But no, I think people should be worried. I think some worry is good, because it makes you plan for the future. And I just think, I mean, for myself, I am ready to see radical and fundamental change, even if it hurts my business. And I'm constantly reminded of that, because there's like some memes going around. They're like, guillotine all the CEOs. I'm like, yeah! Yes! And then I'm like, wait a second.
That's me.
Hang on.
No, but I hear that, and I appreciate it. I mean, I obviously host this YouTube series, and is a bit of a counter to mainstream media narratives in order to offer alternative perspectives on what can be done and what can be accomplished. Yeah. And what you've been able to do is really what I think other CEOs should be looking to. And I really like this idea of ethical capitalism. I mean, I'm probably more of a social democrat. I like the idea of taking things out and redistributing, not in a communist sort of way, but in a healthy community-based.
Like profit capping.
Exactly.
Like, as I said, like, you know what? Yeah, I probably deserve to live comfortably if I build this business, but also there's a certain point where I'm just not going to need that much money.
Yeah.
You know, if I ever get there. But yeah, there's ways to do it. Like, let people, like, you know, give everybody universal basic income. Let people pursue, like, creativity and innovation on their own. Like, yeah, some people take advantage of it, but who cares? Let them live their lives. Like,
exactly.
The majority of people will want to innovate and to create and push those boundaries. And, you know, I think it's so scary to think about what might be on the other side because we can't picture it yet. But I feel like we're going to get there, and it's either going to be really messy and very violent, or we can all just say, you know what, like, maybe we should just look out for our neighbors, and maybe we should just think about how we can all live safe, healthy, and fulfilling lives instead of just one. Like, they're fundamental and very simple ideas.
Well, on that note, I think that is a great place to leave it with hope for the future.
Thank you.
Jill Van Gene, CEO of FATSO Peanut Butter, social advocate, change maker. I mean, she's really put her money where her mouth is. Thank you for sharing your experiences today. FATSO Peanut Butter is available in many grocery stores across Canada and now in the United States. Please pick up a jar, support this wonderful company. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Jill.
Thanks for having me.
Are you tired of crumbly, hard-to-scoop Fatso cocoa? Have you ruined every knife and spoon that you own? Has Fatso cocoa made your life completely unbearable? Well, not anymore. Introducing Fatso Cocoa 2.0. Our new and improved formulation is now smooth and creamy and even more delicious. It has the same high-performance plant-based fats and fiber you know and love from our other fabulous flavors. Scoop it, spread it, pour it, drink it. Amazing!
Before new and improved Fatso Cocoa, I was drawing up these divorce papers. But now look at her. She's rebuilt our entire house.
You won't need to serve your peanut butter with a hammer and chisel anymore. Look for this new and improved Fatso Cocoa label at a retailer near you.